Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets, a family podcast of pirates and penguins. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
You know, when I buy a new phone, I get it. As soon as I get it, I rip it open, I upgrade to it, I'm using it right away. When you get a new phone, it came on Thursday. It's now Sunday, and you still won't let me upgrade your old phone because you're too busy with it.
Well, yeah. You got to catch me when I'm not trying to use my phone to cook Easter stuff.
Okay,
Thursday happened to be Holy Thursday,
yes.
And then there was Good Friday and Holy Saturday,
and all these things required
Easter
your phone.
Sunday.
Well, yes, because you needed iBreviary for your phone.
Yeah.
And you needed the paprika recipe app on your phone.
Right. Got to pray the prayers and do the recipes
and talk to everybody.
Talk to family.
All your friends.
Easter greetings.
Who are all commiserate on their cooking and all that sort of stuff.
I spent like an hour talking to my dad, and I talked to my sister.
Yes.
And
Easter Sunday, I get it. We're not upgrading phones on Easter Sunday. That's a busy time for phone use.
And Saturday and Holy Saturday is dyeing eggs and making cheesecake and making bread.
I know.
And
all these things are. I mean, it is amazing how your phone has become inextricably linked to all the things in your life.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually.
It is kind of scary. So, we had to upgrade Melanie's phone because Isabella has a phone with no phone plan, which she cracked a screen on a year ago, and the bits of glass are now falling out as she uses it. That's a bad thing. So, we wanted to upgrade her phone. So, we're giving her Melanie's old phone. And Melanie now has a shiny new blue iPhone.
As soon as we do the
transfer. One of these days, we'll get to it. Hopefully before the 2 weeks run out of the return window, and you are not now stuck with a phone that you decided that you didn't really like.
Right.
So that's your incentive.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. So do you want to start with some listener feedback? Okay. Jill sent us a message on Facebook and said, this is what last time we talked about spices. And we talked about Marvel movies that you're watching. So she says, I have to put in a plug for our favorite spice source, the Spice Merchant in Wichita, Kansas. She says, the spices are great. My husband goes to stock up every few weeks for tea, if nothing else, which is actually really kind of a cool idea. If finding a tea merchant. She says, the Darjeeling is my new favorite. Truly delicious. I didn't look them up, but I wonder if they do mail order. The Spice Merchant in Wichita.
Wasn't that why she's recommending it? Because way we can mail order.
Well, I would assume so. So we'll have to check them out. We'll give them a try. We'll order something from them. I like their front page of their website because it has coffee, so that looks good. That is a good sign. Douglas, Wichita. East Douglas in Wichita. All right, and then she says, we're watching all the Marvel movies in chronological order with our youngest with the older 3 at PSR every week. Parish...
I think PSR is like religious ed.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it stands for, though, but I've seen people
It's a regionalism. There's in certain places in this country, people refer to what we call religious ed or faith formation is PSR. Parish. Oh, let us know.
I didn't call... I'm trying to remember what we called it.
Well, when I was a kid, we called it CCD, but I'm
CCD.
Old. We're old.
I mean, I didn't go to CCD because I went to Catholic school, so...
Right. But it was CCD.
But it was CCD,
yes.
Our parish.
That's what we called it. Anyway, so she says...
I don't even know what CCD stood for.
Catholic Confraternity of Catholic Doctrine. It was the organization that produced the catechetical materials back in the 50s. or earlier even.
But we're no longer producing the materials that were being used at CCD classes in the
Confraternity of
80s.
Catholic Doctrine is no longer doing it.
Right.
So, yes, that's why it's no longer CCD. Oh,
well, but I'm thinking even in the 80s when it was being called CCD at my parish, it just
hung the term that hung around.
Right.
Because our parents had gone to CCD. So, Jill's message.
I'm sorry.
She says, we're watching all the Marvel movies in chronological order. Just a warning in case you care, Disney Plus doesn't have all of them. Their list just skips the ones you can stream on their site. And technically true. There are some Marvel movies that include Marvel characters, but the rights to those characters were owned by other movie studios before Disney bought Marvel. So Sony has owned Spider-Man for a long time, and I think this is like some rule where if they make a Spider-Man movie every 5 years, they get to keep the franchise. And so that's why they keep remaking it with new Spider-Man like a new guy playing Spider-Man, like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garofalo, Holland. Like they keep redoing it and rebooting it. But now there's been 2 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, but there's an agreement between Disney and Sony for him to appear in the Disney Marvel movies. So, yeah. But you can watch those, I think, on Amazon Prime or whatever.
Yeah. One of these, I mean, I kind of feel like I want to even get through the regular Disney movies before I even start to branch out to the stuff.
Not super necessary to watch them. They're fun. They're cute, but you don't miss anything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe if you don't watch them. The other one is the Incredible Hulk. That's by Universal. Universal owns that one, and you don't even need to watch that one. It might be the Ed. Who's the guy in American History X? Fight Club.
Edward Norton.
Edward Norton. Yeah. So there's one with Edward. This is the one with Edward Norton.
Okay.
And it wasn't that great. I mean, I haven't seen it in ages, and it doesn't really relate to the Hulk that we see in the Disney Marvel. So
okay.
Anyway, Jill, thank you very much for your feedback, and thank you for the recommendation for the Spice Merchant. I will give them a shot and see what they do, see how they are, because they get tea and coffee too, and maybe we'll order some tea and coffee. All right, but we need to talk about Easter. We're going to do a little, maybe a little shorter of an episode today. We're not going to talk about movies and books and those sorts of things. We're going to stick to some of the current events and then some food stuff, because we always got to talk about food. This year, because of everything, we didn't. At least we got to go to Easter Sunday Mass, but we didn't get to go to Holy Thursday. After all, you were going to be going with Isabella to Holy Thursday because our pastor had asked. We mentioned this last week. Our pastor had asked for her to serve at the Mass.
Right.
There was one problem, though. There was a miscommunication. There was supposed to be a rehearsal on Wednesday at 5:30 that you were going to take her to, and so you took her to that, and
there was nobody there. It was the church was locked. It was dark. There was nobody there. It turns out that it was actually not this past Wednesday, but the previous Wednesday.
So when Father said, he said in his email, I had talked to him like on Monday of that week, and he had said, I got in his email, and in his Monday email he said, can she serve on Holy Thursday? The rehearsal will be on Wednesday at 5:30. Now, from his point of view, that's clear. Wednesday is the next Wednesday coming up. In my point of view, the Mass was on Holy Thursday, and the rehearsal will be on Wednesday. I'm thinking the Thursday you referred to, and then the Wednesday connected to it.
Immediately before it.
Yes. Which, when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that might be, when the day before might not be the best day for a rehearsal, I guess. Right. Anyway.
And Holy Week might be the best time for a rehearsal. As it turned out, though, it was okay because they ended up not doing the outdoor Mass. They moved it indoors.
Which meant no extra altar servers.
So in the end, 5:30 on Holy Thursday, we could have rushed out the door and tried to get seats in the church, but we would have had to skip dinner, and it was getting really late, and we were kind of, so we ended up
not.
We ended up watching the live stream of the Holy Thursday Mass from the Cathedral
from the Cathedral of the Holy Cross in Boston
with Cardinal Sean.
And then you watched that with the kids on Friday afternoon. You watched the Good Friday.
Right from the Cathedral.
And then that brings us to Holy Saturday, which we also watched the one from the Cathedral with Cardinal Sean on Catholic TV.
We watched the Vigil.
Yeah.
Because our parish had the English Vigil at 10:30 p.m. and there was
no way
the children were going to be sitting through
we have
2-hour mass that starts at 10:30.
Yes. And that brings us to something I want to share with you all, because as we were talking about this, back in 2013,
year that Lucy was born.
Yes, Lucy was newborn. She was only 3 months old, I guess, right?
Right.
And we decided to take 5 children 6 years and under to the Easter Vigil Mass at our parish.
Mind you, we had successfully taken several of these children to the Easter Vigil previously.
Now, after that happened, I wrote a blog post on my blog, and I talked about it on a radio show I was on at the time called The Good Catholic Life. And I wanted to share that blog post with you now, and then we'll come back and we'll continue. And so here's my blog post. Why not to take 5 children to Easter Vigil, or how to reaffirm priests in their celibacy? Happy Easter! We ventured out last night to the Easter Vigil with all 5 kids, and while it wasn't a complete disaster, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. We've made it a habit in the past few years to go to both Christmas Midnight Mass and Easter Vigil with the kids. I was dubious the first time, but Melanie was confident, and the kids did seem to love it so. And it has generally worked fine, especially since we had Melanie's sister Teresa living with us to help. But by this past Christmas 2012, Teresa had moved back to Texas, and Melanie was 9 months pregnant and feeling under the weather, and Ben, in particular, seemed uninterested in waking at 11 p.m. to go out into the cold, so it was just me and Isabella and Sophia, and it went fine. So this Holy Week, I went to Holy Thursday with Isabella, Sophia, and Ben, where only Isabella went last year, and that went fine too. Then Good Friday with everybody, and that was fine as well, which may account for our hubris. Because Teresa came to visit for Easter, and so we said, let's take 5 children 6 years old and under to a mass that begins at their bedtime and will likely go for 2+ hours in both darkness and bright light. Piece of cake, right? We had an early dinner of roast lamb with loins girt and staff in hand because we knew we had to get to the church early to sit up front. Everything goes better when they're up front and can see all the action. Well, we didn't calculate that the catechumens and their families would have the first few rows reserved to themselves. Thus, we ended up sitting about 6 rows back. That was our first setback. Get it? Setback? We were also a little more crowded than usual, and so all of the kids couldn't stretch out in the pew when they got sleepy, and so Ben ended up laying under the pew with a kneeler as a pillow. Right there is a good argument for keeping kneelers in churches. We had a tense moment or two as the church was plunged into darkness as I tried to calm Anthony, who was a little afraid that I was trying to sneak a bedtime onto him. But as the Paschal candle came forward and the tapers were lit, their eyes were all aglow. Of course, the 3 oldest ones wanted to have tapers of their own, and with an adult per child, we let them hold little flames in their hands. Our only excuse for such poor judgment has to be sleep deprivation. Oh, they didn't light anything on fire, but that's only because each adult had an iron grip on each little fist, waving the flames close to hair, clothes, bench, neighboring parishioners, etc. And then we nearly had a revolt when we had to extinguish the candles and return to darkness. Back in the dark, both Ben and Anthony wanted to climb into Melanie's lap at the same time, while poor sleeping Lucia was already there, causing her to squawk in the silent church as the first reading from Genesis about the creation of the world was being read. But a quick pop-on to nurse by Melanie in the dark solved that, while Teresa and I each grabbed a boy and tried to settle them. Meanwhile, Sophia had settled down to sleep. Then the lights came on, and as he delivered his homily, our pastor, Father Curry, decided to use Lucia as part of the message, talking about how Lucia crying out in the darkness is like mankind crying out while still under the penalty of sin and death. Which was nice, except his clear intent was to come over and take Lucia from Melanie and walk around with her. To which Melanie gave an emphatic no, since every eye in the now brightly lit church was on her, and there was no way to disengage the nursing baby without someone in the crowd getting an eyeful of Melanie, even for a split second. And so Father continued his homily without babe in arms, and just made a reference to how Christ feeds us when we cry out, like Melanie feeds Lucia, to satisfy her crying out. pew, but still a little mortifying for her. Everything went well from there, with children conking out as we made our laborious but no less glorious way through the litany of the saints, 2 baptisms and confirmations, until finally, as we began the liturgy of the Eucharist, the problem occurred. First, Sophia woke up on the bench, and that's never a good thing. Like Melanie, Sophia does not like to be woken up and then be unable to get back to sleep. So she started whining, and whining is always the prelude to crying, which leads to angry crying. You don't want angry crying. You wouldn't like Sophia when she's angry crying. Meanwhile, Anthony, who had been sleeping in my arms like a baby, a lead-lined squirming baby, started to wake as well. And I knew we were headed for a full-on Katie bar the door meltdown by 1, if not 2, children. Swift action had to be taken. So I handed Anthony off to Teresa and told her to take him out to the entrance of the church. He's been there, he's used to it, and it usually calms him. I picked up Sophia, did I mention I was in the middle of the pew? And her coat, and tried to gracefully exit the pew over Melanie, Lucia, and a still sleeping Benedict. And by gracefully, I mean bumbling, stumbling with a writhing 5-year-old in a giant poofy dress as I knocked discarded tapers, missalettes, mass prompt cards, and Lord knows what else to the ground. And as I got to the end of the pew, the hosanna was half over by now, and it would soon grow quiet again, my suit coat button got caught in Sophia's hair, like twisted around a strand in her braid, and so the poor child really began to wail again. Extricating my button from her hair with a bit of effort, I rushed for the closest exit, which happened to be just off the sanctuary up front, where everyone could see me carrying the poor girl like a Secret Service agent hustling the president undercover. And as we get to the little entranceway, I realize that I have forgotten Sophia's beloved blanket, the only thing that consoles her, the one thing she reaches for when she's upset by anything. I'm left with a dilemma. Do I take her back into the church, wailing all the while for the blanket? Or do I take her without it to the car to wait for Mass to end, all while the poor child screams inconsolably? So I did the only logical thing that came to mind. I abandoned her in the cold, dark vestibule while I went back into the church for the blanket. I can state with certitude that the vestibule is indeed not soundproof. After some ridiculous hand gestures at Melanie holding 2 children while helpful folk all around tried to press all manner of things into my hands except the blanket, I finally make it back to the disoriented, cold, alone, sleepy, angry girl in the vestibule. Once we get to the car, I strap her in her seat. With difficulty, since she sits in the back and usually has to buckle herself because it's inaccessible to adults. The near catatonic girl is doing nothing of the sort, so I'm left hanging out the back hatch of the minivan in my nice suit trying to restrain a screaming child. I'm lucky I'm not in jail. After a few minutes, Sophia begins to calm, and she starts making coherent demands along the lines of, "Bring me back to Mommy, you bad, bad daddy." Okay, I may be reading into her actual phrase, which was just the 2 words, "Want Mommy!" By this time, I could tell communion was in progress because people were streaming into the parking lot. Yes, even on Easter Vigil, people couldn't be bothered to stay for a few minutes for the final blessing. Meanwhile, inside the church, poor Melanie was alone in the pew with Lucia and Ben in her lap. Isabella was in the pew ahead of us with her cousins and my brother who had come to our church for Mass. And thus she couldn't get up to go to communion, never mind maneuver, so as to let the people coming back from communion, including 2 elderly crippled nuns with canes, back into the pew, making them go around in the pew behind her. Happily, after my brother came back from communion, he took Lucia from Melanie, who then carried sleeping Ben to walk around the back of the church and get in line herself. Eventually, I got Sophia calmed enough in the car with the promise that we would go back inside to Mommy if she stopped screeching like a banshee, and so we slowly trekked our way back inside, this time by the proper entrance, and we arrived at our former pew by the time of the final blessing. I could feel every eye burning the back of my head and could hear the unspoken, "What kind of idiot takes 5 children out at this time of night to a 2.5-hour Mass? Of course they're going to melt down." I wanted to protest preemptively, but they usually do so well. Yet I knew they would be right. Nevertheless, at the end of the Mass, many, many people who are either delusional or extremely charitable came up to us and assured us that the kids were so good and did so well considering the situation, etc. I have to conclude that we were living off the credit earned at so many other masses where they're usually well behaved. Getting them in the car and then into bed at home was no picnic either, but that at least was in private and somewhat normal, so it doesn't bear repeating. In any case, it's Easter, and the wonder and beauty of the day outweighs the mortifying embarrassment of the meltdowns, and so we enjoy the feast of the resurrection of Christ, whose saving work has accomplished whatever our own failings or our own mistakes that prevent us from having a perfect holiday, recognizing that perfection exists in Christ, and all that's required of us is just to be present and open. Happy Easter to all. Christus resurrexit. And that is why you don't take 5 children to the Easter Vigil. From March 31st, 2013. That was...
I would not have told it the same way exactly, but...
It's a perception of or memory.
It's not so much that I don't think you got the facts right. It's just the framing of it. I would have told it differently.
It's based on a true story.
It's based on a true story. Yes.
Most of the things that actually happened with me are what happened. Now, some of the stuff that involved you, I'll admit, I just took that from things that you might have said and my guess as what was going on. But yeah, but the general outline of the events that happened involving me and Sophia, those things actually happened.
Yes. Yeah. It
including the vestibule and the screaming, everything.
Yes. Mostly I just sort of remember the kind of being trapped under 2 sleeping children while everybody else was going to communion, thinking, oh, help.
Right. How can I go to communion? Yeah. That was, yeah. So that was,
but fortunately John was there to rescue me.
My brother John was there to help. Yeah. So that was our memory of going to a too late Easter Vigil. That Easter Vigil was earlier, but the kids were younger. But going to a 10:30 at night, and probably just as well, because we decided to watch the Easter Vigil from the Cathedral, the Holy Cross, here on TV, and that started at 8. And as it went along, each of the children started falling asleep. And the funny thing is Sophie fell asleep and then woke up and she wasn't angry, Sophie, but she was cranky. Sophie.
She was not best pleased. She was disoriented, as she usually is when she wakes up.
And she was kind of mad that she slept through it. She didn't want to sleep through it.
Yeah. So she's just got up and went to bed. And at that point, Ben had already decamped to bed. And Isabella, Anthony, and Lucia made it through everything. I think Isabella skipped out during communion. She was like, okay, I've basically seen everything, so I'm done. But Anthony and Lucy, to the bitter end, they
stuck it out.
I was impressed. And then of course we all went to mass this morning.
Yes, we got
at our parish.
Yes, we had tickets to go for the 10:30 mass. It was as full as I've seen it since Christmas of 2019.
It was really lovely. There were so many families there with small children. In front of us, there was a family with 6 kids, and behind us, there was a family with like 5 kids. And on the other side, to the left of us, there was a family with like 4 or 5 kids. There was lots of little kids there. It was just lovely.
It was really nice. And it was a priest who I'm pretty sure is I think he's African. He had a Frenchish accent, so probably from one of the former French colonies. Probably a Jesuit studying at Boston College.
Right. He was very young.
He was very young. And
if I had seen him like not vested, I might have assumed he was a seminarian or even a high school student. Like I would not have been shocked to find out that he was in high school. He was really young looking.
And the African Jesuits are really good.
They really are. I love them.
Yeah, they're not like the American Jesuits you normally run across. He was really good. So we get a lot of missionary priests since our pastor is a missionary priest. So we are so blessed with all of the priests that we have. All of our regular priests are are black. I won't say African American because none of them are actually Americans. They're all from other countries, but from Haiti, Cape Verde, Nigeria. I'm not sure where this priest was from, but we've had them from all over, and it's so awesome. Our kids love the fact that we have priests who are from all over the Africa and the Caribbean, and they enjoy it. And I love that they get the experience of the universality of the church.
Right. I was reading an article just this past week that was talking about how the majority of Catholics in the world today are from the Southern Hemisphere.
Yes.
So the church, if you look at the demographics of the Catholic Church as a whole, it is not European and American. It is South African. South Africa.
I'm sorry, South America.
South America, Africa, Asia.
Yeah.
And Europe and North America are a minority.
Oh yeah.
Of the Catholics in the world, which is, it's interesting. I mean, we have, Americans have a tendency to kind of put ourselves into the center, or to think that Europe is the center. And that's true sort of in terms of like the fact that
Rome is there, and historically.
But that's while it was historically true that the church was very centered in Europe, that's not, the origins of it, of course, were in the Middle East. And the church was really big in Africa in the first few centuries until the Muslims basically took over.
Right.
So kind of interesting to think about how it's kind of returned to being a not European institution.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's growing.
So after Mass, we came home. Our plan was to come home, have dinner here, and then go over to my brother John's house where my family would gather with my parents, and we'd have dessert, for after, to end out Easter.
That was the plan.
So I made deviled eggs, which I have done before, and that's good. Don't drown that. And then we were starting to prepare dinner, and so dinner was going to be grilled leg of lamb, and some chicken skewers for the kids who don't like lamb. We were making broccoli with hollandaise sauce and challah. You made some challah yesterday, the bread.
Yep.
And Greek potatoes, roasted potatoes with Greek flavoring,
and some roasted squash.
It's
a fairly simple meal. I mean, not a gigantic menu.
No, it was good. So we were preparing things, and you were struggling to cut the squash open. So I said, what you need is this new vegetable cleaver I just got. It's razor sharp.
Oh boy.
Long story short. So we went to urgent care. Yes. I sliced off part of my finger. Sorry, folks. Now, the good thing is we have scouts in our house. And when there was blood, at least one of them sprung into action. Isabella sprung into action.
I have to say, Isabella can be squeamish when it's not an emergency, but when it's an emergency, she actually has a very cool head, and she is very good. She's well suited to be senior patrol leader.
Yes. So I yelled, "Get a Band-Aid" to you, and then you went running, and I washed off my finger under the faucet, and I said, "Nope, get something bigger."
I was skeptical about the Band-Aid.
Yes. I mean, I just yelled, "Get something to cover it." I didn't know. I was panicking a little bit at that moment. So went to urgent care. This is, if you are a longtime listener, this is not the first time I've done this. I did this the day after Thanksgiving 2019, I think it was, or was it 18? I forget. It was maybe 19. And so I've done this before, and so I'm back there again, and oh my gosh, this time was harder. I think it was a worse cut because at one point I started getting lightheaded and broke out into a cold flop sweat, and the guy had to have me lay down. I'm like, I'm not usually squeamish about the blood. I don't know what. I think it was dehydrated, might have been part of it. And then agony when we were cleaning it off under the running water. That was he gave me some lidocaine.
I would have insisted on the lidocaine before we got to the running water part.
Yeah, and it was hot water too. That might have been.
Ooh,
and he's like, "Oh, I can turn that down. Could you? Maybe."
Oh, yeah. See, the couple times I've had wounds on fingers that needed to be flush type.
Yeah.
I insisted on the lidocaine.
Yeah. Well, I will remember that for next time.
It is magic stuff. It is really great.
Yeah. Well, although getting the injection in your finger that hurts.
Well, yeah, the injection itself hurts, but
not as bad as the agony under the water, but it was.
Anyway, probably people are not wanting to.
Yeah. So, long story short, I got the surgical foam on it, and it's now covered, and it'll be 5 to 10 days before it gets better. And typing is once again, as I recall, a pain in the neck. But we did get to make dinner. I did grill the lamb. I was not going to be deterred from that.
I was impressed. I was really ready to switch to pizza or something.
Yeah, no. I knew I could take care of it, and the finger was numb, so it wasn't interfering with anything. Except I couldn't put the mitts on my hand to protect from the heat, so I had to do it one handed. But I got through it, and it came out pretty good.
The lamb was really tasty. It was very tender.
So I made a wet rub for it. It was olive oil, oregano, thyme, paprika, rosemary. I think that was it for and some of the shawarma spice that we had left over, and some shawarma spice, lemon juice, garlic, and honey, and mixed it all together and rubbed it all over, and then you pierced it with the knife. Not me.
I stabbed it.
Gently. Gently, safely, and kind of rubbed it all in, and grilled it. Now, it wasn't the best butterflying by the butcher, but it was okay.
It looked like it had been kind of hacked.
But when it was done, it was really tender and tasty. I cook it over the hot side of the charcoal grill for 5 minutes on each side. I could have done them maybe a little shorter on the fat side. I think that burned the fat a little bit, but that's fine. Then I moved it to the colder side of the grill, and basically cooked it there for maybe half hour to almost 40 minutes with till it got to about 130, and perfect. That was perfect. Pulled it, let it rest, sliced it up nice and thin. Nice, like lamb, you need to slice it thin. That's just, I think for me, I think that's the best way to do it. And it was great. The chicken skewers were great. We call it lake house chicken because it's a recipe we talked about before that we did when we were at the lake house last summer, and the kids all like it. It's really good, and that came out good. I think everything else was good. Hollandaise sauce was awesome.
I love hollandaise. This is a really easy blender recipe too. I do not double boil or anything. It's just like melt the butter in the microwave, throw it in the blender. It's super easy.
This was a recipe I got off of the YouTube channel, the French guy cooking, Alex Inus, and he did it there, and it was like, this is, and he as a Frenchman says this was better than any like double boiler hollandaise sauce. Like like the proper French way, maybe a little better, but it's not worth the extra effort. Like, right. It was really good. It was good on everything. Like, how would this taste on lamb?
It was good on the potatoes. It was good on the lamb. It was good on the broccoli. It was good on the bread.
Yeah, that was really good.
It was tasty.
So the only other thing I want to mention about food from this past week was I made a cilantro lime steak the other day. That was a 100% meal. Everyone liked it, including Lucy, including Ben, who are usually the hardest to please. But it was a recipe I got from Milk Street, and I think the thing that really sold it was the marinade. So it's a lot of cilantro, a lot of lime juice, but the marinade has fish sauce in it.
See, that's what I was surprised that Ben even deigned to eat it, because he's usually not a big fan of fish sauce at all.
Yeah, and the fish sauce in this it was so umami blast. The flavor was it was salty and it was umami, and I think that really made it taste so good. It was made with skirt steak, and it was so good. I think. I mean, I was like, I'm gonna eat this for lunch tomorrow, cold out of the leftover bag. I mean, it was so good. I definitely want to try that again. But the cilantro lime steak. So, and then afterward, you made a cheesecake.
I made
lemon lime
orange. It had a little bit of citrus zest, but no other flavoring.
Mm-hmm. It was good.
It was.
You said the texture wasn't what you would hoped.
I goofed. I was tired and I was rushing, and I threw all the ingredients into the bowl rather than whipping the cream cheese first and then adding the sour cream and heavy cream, and the texture suffered. The cream cheese didn't get creamed. It kind of clumped. And so it
was a bit grainy-ish.
Yeah, it created a grainy texture.
I wonder if that made it as poofy as it was.
And
it was
yeah,
very poofy.
I think I overbeat it trying to get it to be creamier.
Oh,
and
you got too much air into it.
Got too much air into it, and it rose up above the. I have a pretty deep springform pan that I was cooking it in, and it was like a good inch above the top of the springform pan. And then then it fell.
And then it fell and cracked.
So,
but it had a nice Trinitarian crack.
It was not. It was not the prettiest, and the texture was a little bit off, but the flavor was good.
The flavor was good. And it was good. The other thing we had for dessert was Grandma's coffee cakes, and not grandma like my mom or your mom or our grandparents.
It's a brand.
It's a brand. It's a local bakery in Boston, a commercial bakery in Boston. So
in Boston proper?
Dorchester.
Okay.
Which is a neighborhood of Boston. So long story short, the kids Cub Scout pack had a fundraiser selling these coffee cakes. They do a thing with the Cub Scout packs, and so the pack got $5, $10, I forget what it was, for every cake sold, and they raised like $1,000 because around here the Grandma's coffee cakes is a legend.
I had never heard of these before.
I hadn't either, actually.
And I was like, okay, like coffee cake, sure, whatever. We're mostly buying this to support the Scouts,
right?
I wasn't expecting a whole lot, despite the fame. And then when you went to pick them up on Saturday, I was thinking, because what we really need on top of all the baking that I've already got planned is 4 coffee cakes.
Right.
Like, to me, the timing just seemed really unfortuitous. And I'm thinking, where are we going to put all of these coffee cakes?
We bought 4 coffee cakes.
But we bought 4. We did find room in the freezer for them. Thank you for the new freezer.
Yes.
But you kept one of them out and sliced into it. And I have to say, it's really,
it is really good.
Very addictively good.
It is moist. It is tender. There's a slight sour of like a sour creamish, but not very sour.
Like a sour cream, like that rich, creamy flavor to it.
But there's plenty of sugar in it too, apparently, of course. And it's very sweet. I mean, it is really good. And that was the cinnamon one. We also have a lemon poppy, a blueberry, and a walnut, I think. Did we get walnut? I forget what the fourth one is. But and they freeze really well, apparently. So it's mygrandma.com.
My grandma's.
Yeah, so it's My Grandmas of New England is the name of the company. I think they do. I don't know if they do mail order.
In fact, shipping information down there.
Yeah, they do wholesale and they do fundraising and they do. I guess it says place a cake order, so I guess you could order them online. I recommend it. It was really good.
I have had more slices than I should have, I have to say.
And they have a ton of different flavors that out there. They vary. New England Cape Cod cranberry, Ted Williams chocolate, New England blueberry. But in any case, that's a 2 thumbs up from us for that. That's really good. All right, we said we were going to keep it short, and we are. And let's wrap it up there. It's Easter, and so we need to rest, and I need to, I don't know, elevate my finger or something. So let's first, though, take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue raising the bets in all the shows at StarQuest. So that's it from us. What did you think of anything we had to say? How was your Easter? What did you have for Easter? We'd love to hear from you and what you had and all that. So let us know by commenting at sqpn.com/bets or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send us an email to bets, BETTS, at sqpn.com. And I'll put some links in our show notes to some of the recipes and to My Grandmas of New England. So and please follow Raising the Bets in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, at the SQPN YouTube channel, or wherever you get podcasts from. Make sure to keep listening to the show. Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest.